A widow found a forgotten village, and what she found there shocked everyone. Mary Johnson had been driving on the dirt road for over 2 hours, trying to escape the memories that had been suffocating her since Joseph's funeral. The engine of her old Civic started making a strange noise before stopping completely in the middle of nowhere. She got out of the car and looked around, searching for any sign of life or help. That's when she saw a narrow trail disappearing among the trees. With few options, she decided to follow it in hopes of finding someone who could help her. What she didn't expect was that after walking for 20 minutes, she would reach a small village that seemed to have come from another century. The first houses she saw were simple, made of wood and covered with old tiles. But what caught her attention the most was the silence. There were no voices of adults talking, no sound of radio or television, only the soft crying of a small child coming from one of the houses. Mary Johnson slowly approached the house where the crying was coming from. The door was slightly ajar, and she knocked lightly. "Is anyone there?" she called carefully. That's when a boy who couldn't have been more than 12 years old appeared at the door, holding a crying baby in his arms. The boy had large, frightened eyes, as if he wasn't used to seeing strangers. "Are you lost, ma'am?" asked the boy, clutching the baby to his chest. "My car broke down on the road. Can you tell me where I can find your parents?" Mary Johnson tried to sound calm, but something about that situation made her uneasy. The boy lowered his eyes and took a while to respond. "There are no parents here, ma'am, just us." "What do you mean, just you?" Mary Johnson felt a tightening in her heart. "Where are the adults?" "They left a long time ago, said they were going to work in the city and would send for us, but they never came back." Mary Johnson looked more closely at the boy and noticed how thin he was, how his clothes were dirty and worn. The baby in his arms was crying from hunger. "And how have you been living?" she asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. "I take care of everyone. My name is Jake. This here is Michael. He's only 8 months old. There are 5 more children scattered in the other houses." At that moment, Mary Johnson felt the world spinning. 7 children living alone, abandoned, taking care of each other. How was that possible? "How long have you been alone?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Since March. It's October now, right?" I lost track exactly. 7 months. 7 months those children had been abandoned to their own fate. Mary Johnson felt her throat tighten and her eyes fill with tears. "Jake, can you show me the other children?" The boy hesitated for a moment, as if he didn't know if he could trust her. Then he nodded and left the house still carrying the baby. They walked through the silent village, and Mary Johnson discovered a reality she never imagined existed. In the second house, she found twin girls about 5 years old, playing on the dirt floor with cloth dolls. They looked at Mary Johnson with curiosity but without fear. "This is Emma, and this is Olivia," Jake introduced. "They're sisters." "Hi, miss," said Emma, the more talkative of the two. "Did you come to get us?" The innocent question broke Mary Johnson's heart. "I don't know yet, my dear. I'm here to help you." In the third house, she found 2 slightly older boys, about 8 and 10 years old, trying to make fire in the wood stove. "Peter and Lucas," said Jake. "They help cook when there's food." "And when there isn't?" asked Mary Johnson. "We used to pick fruit in the woods. Sometimes we fished in the creek. But now it's hard. The fruits are gone and the fish have disappeared." Mary Johnson looked around the village and realized how abandoned and decayed everything was. The gardens were dry, the cisterns empty, the houses in need of repair. How did those children manage to survive for so long? "Jake, you said your parents went to work in the city. Did they send any news, letters, money?" "At first, yes. Mr. Roger used to come here every month and bring some things. He said our parents were working in a big factory and that they would come get us soon. But it's been over 3 months since he last showed up." "Who is this Roger?" "A man from the city. He was the one who came here and talked to our parents. He said there was good work for everyone, that they would earn a lot of money." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mary Johnson began to feel that there was something very wrong with that story. What kind of work would make parents abandon their children for so long? And why did this Roger stop coming? Jake, did your parents leave anything in writing? Any papers that explained where they were going? I can't read well, Mum, but there are some papers in my father's house. Do you want to see them? They walked to a house a bit larger than the others, which seemed to have been the community leader's home. Inside, there was a table with some documents scattered about. Mary Johnson picked up the papers and began to examine them. There was a work contract signed by several people, including Jake's father. The document mentioned work in a textile factory 300 kilometers away, with guaranteed wages and provided lodging. But something about the contract didn't seem right. Jake, how many people lived here before? About 15 adults, plus us, the children. And did they all leave on the same day? Yes. Mr. Roger came with a big bus and took everyone. He said it was better that way, that they would all settle in together and then send for the children. Mary Johnson continued examining the papers and found something that worried her even more. There was a duplicate of a document that appeared to be a deed of sale for the land. According to the paper, all the properties in the village had been sold to a company called St. Benedict Farming, LLC. Jake, do you know if your parents sold your houses? Sold? I don't understand. I mean, you don't live here anymore. The houses are no longer yours. The boy fell silent for a long moment, processing the information. But we were born here. This has always been our home. My grandfather built our house with his own hands. Mary Johnson felt a mix of anger and sadness growing inside her. It was becoming clear that those families had been deceived in some way. But why? And where were the parents now? She spent the rest of the afternoon getting to know the children's situation better. With each conversation, each discovery, it became clearer that they were in a desperate situation. There wasn't enough food, the well water was low, and some of the younger children were clearly malnourished. When the sun began to set, Mary Johnson made a decision. Jake, I'm going to stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the problem with my car and think about how to help you all. You're not going to leave us? Asked the boy, and for the first time since he had met her, his voice trembled like a child's. I won't leave you alone for even one more day, said Mary Johnson, and as she spoke those words, she knew she was making a promise that would change her life forever. That night she slept little. She kept thinking about what had happened to those children's parents, trying to understand how an entire community could just disappear, and most of all wondering how she, a 60-year-old woman who had just lost her husband, would manage to care for 7 abandoned children. In the morning she went to the car to get some things and tried to use her cell phone, but there was no signal. The village seemed completely cut off from the world. As she returned to the village, she saw Jake trying to light a fire to warm some water. Let me help, she said, and knelt beside the boy. While feeding the fire with dry twigs, Jake began to tell more about the last few months. At first I thought it would be easy, that our parents would be back soon, but then the food started to run out, and I didn't know what to do. How did you manage to take care of everyone by yourself? My mom taught me a lot before she left, like how to cook, how to care for Michael when he cries. But there are things I don't know how to do. Mary Johnson looked at this 12-year-old boy who had taken on the responsibility of caring for 6 other children and felt a deep admiration. You are very brave, Jake. Your mother would be proud. Do you think she'll come back? The question hung in the air between them, heavy and painful. Mary Johnson didn't know what to say. Here's what we'll do. First, we'll take care of you all. Then we'll look for your parents. Agreed? Jake nodded, but she saw in his eyes that he had lost hope long ago. Over the following days, Mary Johnson organized herself to care for the children. She used the savings she had brought to buy food in the nearest town, which was almost a 2-hour walk away. She managed to get a mechanic to come to where her car had broken down and fix it, but with each passing day, it became clearer that the situation was much more complex than she had imagined. It wasn't just a matter of taking care of the children until their parents returned. It seemed like the parents weren't coming back anytime soon. It was during her 3rd trip to town that she decided to look for information about that St. Benedict Farming, LLC. At the registry office, she discovered that the company had indeed bought all the village lands, but she couldn't reach anyone from the company. The company exists, but there's no phone registered here, said the registry office employee, and the address on the record is just a P.O. box. That made Mary Johnson even more suspicious. What kind of company buys land but doesn't have a real address? When she returned to the village, she found Jake caring for the twins who had a fever. They were listless, didn't want to play, and Mary Johnson realized she needed to take them to the doctor. "We can't leave here," said Jake, terrified. "What if our parents come back and can't find us? Jake, your sisters are sick. We need to take care of them." "But how will we explain it to the doctor? They'll want to know where our parents are." Mary Johnson realized the boy was right. How would she explain that she was caring for 7 abandoned children without anyone's permission? At the same time, she couldn't leave the sick girls untreated. That's when she made a decision she knew could bring trouble. "I'll say they're my grandchildren, that they're spending a few days with me in the countryside. But what if someone finds out? We'll deal with that later. Right now, the important thing is to take care of Emma and Olivia." She took the twins to the town health center and managed to get them seen. The doctor said they had worms and mild malnutrition, prescribed medication and recommended a better diet. "These girls need care," the doctor told Mary Johnson. "Do you live alone with them?" "Temporarily," she replied, trying not to lie completely. "That's a lot of responsibility for you alone. Do you have any relatives who can help?" At that moment, Mary Johnson thought of her daughter Catherine, who lived in New York. It had been over 2 weeks since they had spoken, since the argument they had at Joseph's funeral. Catherine had insisted that her mother come live with her in the city, saying it made no sense for her to stay alone in the small town. Mary Johnson had refused, saying she didn't want to be a burden to anyone. The argument had ended badly, with Catherine leaving angry. Now, for the first time since she had arrived in the village, Mary Johnson thought about calling her daughter, but how to explain the situation? Catherine would think she had gone crazy. When she returned to the village with the girls and the medicine, she found a surprise that put her on alert. There was a man talking with Jake in the middle of the village, a man in a suit, completely out of place in that rural setting. "Who is that?" she asked Jake as soon as the man walked away. "He said his name is Roger. He's the man I told you about, the one who took our parents." Mary Johnson's heart raced. She was finally face to face with the man who seemed to be at the center of all that mystery. What did he want? "He said he came to get us, that our parents got a house in the city and that we can go live with them now." "And you believed him?" Jake lowered his eyes. "I want to see my mother, but something about him scares me." Mary Johnson looked in the direction where the man had disappeared and felt a chill. "Did he say when he would be back?" "Tomorrow morning, with a bus to take everyone." That night, Mary Johnson barely slept. Something was wrong with that whole story. If the children's parents were really okay and wanted their children back, why did they take so long to send for them? And why did this Roger appear exactly now, after being gone for so long? She spent the night thinking and reached a conclusion that frightened her. She wasn't going to let those children go with that man until she was sure it was safe. But how to stop it? In the morning, Roger showed up promptly with an old, dirty bus. He was accompanied by 2 other men who stayed inside the vehicle. "Good morning," he said to Mary Johnson, clearly surprised to find her there. "Are you related to the children?" "I'm a friend of the family," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I came to help while the parents were away. It's good that someone was taking care of them, but it's no longer necessary. I came to pick up the children." "Can I see some document proving you have authorization from the parents?" Roger smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Mom, I don't need any documents. I've known these families for years. It was through me that they got the jobs in the city. Even so, I'd like to see something in writing." "Are you questioning my word?" His voice hardened. It was then that Jake approached and whispered something in Mary Johnson's ear that made her freeze. "He's different. Last time he came, he was friendlier, and the men in the bus are different." Mary Johnson took a better look at the vehicle and noticed that the men inside seemed nervous, looking around as if they were expecting trouble. "Jake, go get the other children and tell them to come here," she said quietly. When all 7 children were gathered, Mary Johnson made a decision she knew could have serious consequences. "The children are not going with you today." "What do you mean they're not going?" Roger completely lost his composure. Who do you think you are to decide that? Someone who has been taking care of them for weeks while you were off the map. I'll get the police and settle this in court, Roger threatened. Perfect, replied Mary Johnson, trying to sound braver than she felt. I would also like to talk to the police. I have many questions about the disappearance of these children's parents. For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence. Then Roger made a sign to the men in the bus, and they got out. Mary Johnson sensed the danger approaching and instinctively placed the children behind her. Ma'am, we can resolve this in a civilized manner, said Roger, but his voice held a poorly concealed threat. The children are coming with me, whether they like it or not. That's when Jake stepped forward. I'm not going with you, and neither are the other children. Boy, you don't have a choice. Yes, I do. Mrs. Mary Johnson took care of us when you disappeared. She's our family now. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Jake's words deeply moved Mary Johnson, but they also filled her with responsibility. Those children were trusting her to protect them, but she wasn't sure she could face 3 men alone. That's when she heard the sound of a car approaching. To her surprise, it was a military police vehicle. Mary Johnson felt immense relief, but was also confused. Who had called the police? Out of the car stepped a sergeant she knew from town. Good morning, Mrs. Mary Johnson. We received a report that there were abandoned children here. She looked at Roger, who seemed as surprised as she was. Sergeant Robinson, I'm so glad you're here. I was just needing to speak with the police about the situation of these children. Can you explain what's happening here? Mary Johnson took a deep breath. The time had come to tell the whole truth. These 7 children have been living alone for over 7 months. Their parents left for work and never returned. I found them by chance when my car broke down, and I've been taking care of them ever since. And you, sir? The sergeant addressed Roger. I'm responsible for taking the children to their parents. I came to pick them up today. Do you have any documents to prove that? Roger hesitated. The parents have known me for years. I don't need documents. Unfortunately, you do, sir. I can't release children without proper documentation. Sergeant, Mary Johnson interrupted, I'd like to file a formal report about the disappearance of these children's parents. Roger became visibly nervous. They didn't disappear. They're working. It's different. Then why haven't they sent any news in months? Why were the children going hungry? The sergeant looked at the children and noticed their condition. Thin, with dirty clothes, clearly neglected. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us to provide some explanations. Explanations about what? About the situation of these children and the whereabouts of their parents. Roger tried to argue, but ended up being taken to the police station, along with the 2 men who were in the bus. Before leaving, he looked at Mary Johnson with a hateful expression that made her shudder. You don't know what you're getting into, he said quietly. After they left, the sergeant spoke a bit more with Mary Johnson. Mrs. Johnson, you'll have to come to the station tomorrow to formalize the report, and we'll need to involve Child Protective Services to resolve the children's situation. Will they be taken away from me? She asked, feeling panic rise. Not for now, but we'll need to get everything in order. Do you have any relatives who can help? Mary Johnson thought again of her daughter, Catherine. She knew it was time to call her and explain the whole situation. I have a daughter in New York. I'll talk to her. After the sergeant left, Mary Johnson sat down with the children to explain what had happened. Things are going to change now, she said. The police will investigate what happened to your parents, and maybe other people will come to take care of you. Are you leaving? Asked Emma, one of the twins. I don't know yet, my dear. It depends on many things. I want you to stay, said Jake. You're the only person who truly cared for us. That night, Mary Johnson finally called Catherine. The conversation was difficult. Mom, where were you? I've been calling for weeks. Catherine, I need to tell you something very important. Can you sit down? She told the whole story from the beginning. At first, Catherine thought her mother was delusional. Mom, you found 7 abandoned children and decided to care for them alone. That's crazy. I couldn't abandon them, Catherine. You didn't see the state they were in. But you can't solve the world's problems. There are institutions for that. What institutions? These children were starving for months, and nobody knew they existed. The argument went on for over an hour. In the end, Catherine agreed to come visit her on the weekend to better understand the situation. But Mom, you need to understand you can't keep 7 children. You're 60 years old. So what if I'm 60? I'm not dead yet. That's not it, Mom. It's just that raising children is a lot of work. And money. How are you going to support everyone? It was a question Mary Johnson had no answer for. Her savings were quickly running out from buying food and medicine for the children. The next day, she went to the police station to give her statement. The detective received her seriously. Mrs. Mary Johnson, you've made a serious report. Accusations of child abandonment and possible human trafficking. Human trafficking? This Roger you mentioned doesn't exist in our records. The name he gave is fake. What do you mean fake? The ID he presented doesn't match any real document. Furthermore, we discovered that this St. Benedict Farming LLC is also a shell company. Mary Johnson felt a chill in her stomach. What does that mean? It means someone deliberately deceived these families, possibly to take over their lands. And the children's parents, where are they? That's still under investigation. But from what we've discovered so far, there was never a textile factory hiring workers from this region. So the children were abandoned on purpose? It appears so. Someone wanted them to be alone until... The detective hesitated. Until what? Until something happened to them that would justify permanently taking over the lands. Mary Johnson felt nauseous. Someone had coldly planned the abandonment of 7 children to steal their family's lands. It was an evil she couldn't comprehend. Detective, can I continue caring for the children while the investigation continues? For now, yes. But Child Protective Services will make periodic visits to monitor the situation. When Mary Johnson returned to the village, she found Catherine waiting for her. Her daughter had arrived from New York earlier than expected. Mom, I needed to see with my own eyes, said Catherine, looking around the village. And what do you think? It's worse than I imagined. How did these children manage to survive alone? They spent the rest of the day talking. Catherine met each of the children and heard their stories. In the late afternoon, mother and daughter sat down to talk alone. Mom, I understand why you can't abandon them, but this isn't sustainable. Why not? Because you don't have the means to raise 7 children. You don't have money. You don't have adequate housing. You don't have support. I have love. Isn't that worth anything? It's worth a lot, Mom, but it's not enough. Catherine sighed. Mom, I have a proposal to make. What? Come live with me in New York. Bring the children. My apartment is small, but we can manage temporarily. And in New York there are more resources, better schools, more opportunities for them. Mary Johnson remained silent for a long moment. Would you do that? Accept 7 strange children into your home? They're not strange, Mom. They're the family you chose. And if they're important to you, they're important to me too. That night, Mary Johnson talked with Jake about Catherine's proposal. You want us to move to New York? Asked the boy. It's a possibility. There you could study in better schools, have more opportunities. But what if our parents come back and can't find us here? It was a painful question, but one that needed to be faced. Jake, you yourself said you don't believe they're coming back anymore. The boy lowered his eyes. That's true, but I still have hope. And you can keep having it. Even if we go to New York, the police will keep looking for your parents. What if we don't like it there? Then we come back. New York isn't the end of the world. Jake became thoughtful. Aunt Mary Johnson, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing this for us? You didn't even know us. Mary Johnson smiled. You know, Jake, when I found you, I was running away from my own life. My husband had passed away and I felt useless without purpose. You gave me a reason to wake up every day. So we helped each other? Exactly. You saved me just as much as I saved you. The next day, Mary Johnson made a decision. She would accept Catherine's proposal and move to New York with the children. But first, she wanted to settle some things in the village. She went to the house that had belonged to Jake's father and searched for more documents. She found old papers showing that the families had lived there for generations. They were documents that could be important in the future when the land situation was resolved. She also found old family photographs, which she carefully kept for the children. One day they would want to remember their parents. While organizing the belongings, she found something that intrigued her. It was a notebook where Jake's father wrote down daily things. The last entries were about Roger and the job offer in the city. "The man seems honest," was written on one page. "He promises good pay and a house for the family, but something about him bothers me. He's going too fast, wants us to sign everything today." On the next page, "I talked to the others. Everyone is excited about the opportunity. I'm still suspicious, but I can't deny a better chance for my family." And in the last entry, "Tomorrow we leave. Leaving Jake and the other children is the hardest part, but it's only for a few months. Roger guaranteed we'd come get them soon." Mary Johnson closed the notebook with tears in her eyes. That father had had misgivings about Roger, but still decided to trust him, probably because he wanted a better life for his family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. She took the notebook for Catherine to read. "This could be used as evidence in the investigation," said her daughter. "Yes, but it also shows how these men were deceived." They spent the following days organizing the move. Catherine had spoken with the building manager in New York and gotten temporary permission for the children to live in the apartment. "It'll be tight," said Catherine, "but it's temporary. We'll look for a bigger house as soon as possible." "Catherine, I don't know how to thank you." "Mom, we're family. Family helps each other." On the last day in the village, Mary Johnson gathered all the children for a talk. "Are you sure you want to come with me to New York?" "We want to stay with you," said Emma, "even if it's different from everything you know." "We'll get used to it," said Peter. "The important thing is that we'll stay together." Mary Johnson looked at those 7 children who had completely changed her life and felt blessed. "So let's go, start a new life together." The move to New York was harder than anyone expected. Catherine's apartment was really small for 9 people. They had to get creative with the space, putting mattresses in the living room and organizing shower shifts. But the children adapted with an ease that surprised everyone. Jake, who had taken on the role of the oldest brother for so long, helped the younger ones get used to life in the big city. The biggest challenge was getting them all into school. Catherine and Mary Johnson spent weeks visiting public schools, explaining the children's special situation. "It's a very irregular situation," said the principal of one school. "The children don't have proper documentation. There's no updated vaccination record." "But they have a right to education," argued Catherine. "Yes, they do. But you need to regularize their situation first." It was a slow and bureaucratic process, but eventually they managed to enroll all the children. The biggest problem was that they were behind in their studies. Months without classes had left big gaps in their learning. Mary Johnson dedicated herself to helping them with homework every afternoon. She had studied through high school and could help with the basics, but some subjects were beyond her knowledge. "Aunt Mary Johnson, I don't understand this math problem," said Lucas, frustrated with a math equation. "Let me see." She examined the exercise and realized she couldn't solve it either. "We'll ask Catherine for help when she gets home from work." Catherine worked as a secretary at an accounting firm and came home late. Even when tired, she always made time to help the children with their studies. "Mom, we need to think about hiring a private tutor," she said one night after spending 2 hours helping Peter with English. "With what money?" "That's true, we're barely managing to cover basic expenses." It was true, Mary Johnson's savings were practically gone, and Catherine's salary wasn't enough to support 9 people. They were living on the financial edge. That's when Catherine had an idea. "Mum, what if we looked for an NGO that works with children? Maybe they can help with educational support." "Do you think such organizations exist?" "I'll research." Catherine spent days searching online and making contacts. Eventually she found an organization called Hope Institute that worked with children in vulnerable situations. "They offer free tutoring," Catherine explained to her mother, "and also psychological support for children who've been through trauma. Do you think our children need psychological support?" "Mum, they were abandoned by their parents. They lived alone for months. Of course they need help processing that." Mary Johnson had been so focused on the children's basic needs that she hadn't thought about the emotional impact of everything they'd been through. "You're right. Let's contact this organization." The first visit to Hope Institute was revealing. The psychologist who saw them, Dr. Lisa, spoke individually with each child. "The children are coping well with the situation, considering everything they've been through," the psychologist explained to Mary Johnson and Catherine. "But there are signs of trauma that need to be addressed." "What kind of signs?" "Jake, for example, has taken on too much responsibility for his age. He still feels guilty about what happened to his younger siblings. And the twins are afraid of being alone, even for just a few minutes." "And what can we do?" "Regular therapy, lots of patience, and most importantly, security. They need to know they won't be abandoned again." The Hope Institute became a second home for the children. Besides therapy, they participated in educational and recreational activities that helped them develop socially and emotionally. It was also there that Mary Johnson met other families going through difficult situations. She realized she wasn't alone, that there were many people struggling to care for children in complex circumstances. One of these people was Mrs. Anderson, a 70-year-old woman who had taken custody of 4 grandchildren after her daughter died in an accident. "At first I thought I wouldn't manage," Mrs. Anderson told Mary Johnson. 4 small children, and me at this age, but love finds its way along the journey." "How do you manage to support everyone?" "With great difficulty. I receive a small pension and sometimes do some sewing work, but we make do. What matters is they have a roof over their heads and food on the table." Talking with Mrs. Anderson, Mary Johnson realized her situation wasn't as impossible as it sometimes seemed. If a 70-year-old woman could care for 4 children, she could too. But the financial difficulties kept growing. Even with help from the Hope Institute, the expenses for food, clothing, and school supplies for 7 children were enormous. That's when Catherine received an unexpected job offer. "Mum, my boss offered me a promotion," she said one evening. "That's great. More money will help a lot." "Yeah, but there's a problem. It's to work at the company's branch in Chicago." Mary Johnson felt her heart tighten. "Would you have to move?" "It's a really good opportunity, Mum. The salary is almost double what I make here." "But what about the children and me?" "You could come with me. Chicago could be a fresh start for everyone." "Catherine, the children just got settled here. They're doing well in school, getting therapy at the Institute. It's not fair to uproot them again." "Mum, with the new salary I could rent a bigger house. The children would have their own rooms, and we could hire a private tutor." It was a tempting offer, but Mary Johnson was torn. On one hand, she knew their current financial situation wasn't sustainable. On the other, she was afraid to move the children again. "Let me talk with them," she finally said. That night after dinner, Mary Johnson gathered all the children in the living room. "I need to talk with you about something important," she began. The children looked at her attentively. They had learned to recognize when Mary Johnson was worried. "Catherine received a job offer in Chicago. It's a very good opportunity that could help our financial situation." "Will we have to move again?" asked Jake. "It's a possibility, but I want to know what you think." "I like it here," said Emma. "I made friends at school." "Me too," agreed Olivia. "But if we stay here, what will happen?" asked Peter, always the most practical. "Can you take care of us by yourself?" It was the question Mary Johnson had been avoiding asking herself. "I don't know, sweetheart, it will be difficult. And if Catherine goes to Chicago and we stay here, won't we see her anymore?" asked Lucas. "You'll see her. She can come visit, and you can go visit her too." The children fell silent, processing the information. "Aunt Mary Johnson," Jake finally said, "we trust you. If you think it's better to go, we'll go. If you think it's better to stay, we'll stay. But you have a right to your opinion. You're the ones who will have to live with the consequences." "We've moved so many times already," said Michael, just 9 years old. "One more won't make a difference. What matters is we'll stay together." That night, after the children went to sleep, Mary Johnson and Catherine talked until late. "What do you think, Mom? Should we try Chicago? I'm scared, Catherine. What if it doesn't work out? What if the children don't adjust? Mum, life is full of uncertainties. We never know if things will work out. But sometimes we need to take risks to get something better. It's just that they've already been through so much. I don't want them to suffer more. Mum, look at what you've already accomplished. You found 7 abandoned children and managed to give them a family. If you manage that, you can do anything. Mary Johnson thought about her daughter's words. It was true she had faced challenges she never imagined she could overcome. All right, she finally said, let's go to Chicago. The move to Chicago happened 2 months later. Catherine had rented a 3-bedroom house in a simple but safe neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it was infinitely better than the cramped apartment in New York. The children were delighted to have a yard to play in. For months they had been squeezed into an apartment with no space to run and play ball. Look, Aunt Mary Johnson, shouted Peter, running through the yard. We can plant a garden here. The idea of having a garden excited all the children. They had grown up in a rural village and missed the connection with the land. Catherine managed to enroll all of them in a public school near home. This time the process was easier because the children's legal situation had been partially regularized in New York. Mary Johnson also found an organization similar to Hope Institute in Chicago, where the children could continue their psychological support. But not everything was easy. The cost of living in Chicago was higher than they expected, and even with Catherine's better salary, the budget remained tight. Mom, I need to find a way to help with the expenses, Mary Johnson said one night. You already help by taking care of the children. That's worth a lot of money. But it doesn't pay the bills. I need to work. Mom, you're 60 years old. Who's going to give you a job? I don't know, but I have to try. Mary Johnson spent weeks looking for work. It was humiliating to be rejected in several places because of her age, but she didn't give up. Finally, she found a position as a caregiver for the elderly in a nursing home. The salary wasn't high, but it was something. At least now I'm contributing, she told Catherine. Mom, you were already contributing. Without you, I could never take care of 7 children and work at the same time. It was true. With Mary Johnson working outside, the family logistics became much more complicated. Catherine had to leave work earlier to pick up the younger children from school, and Jake had to take on even more responsibilities. This isn't working, Catherine said after a few weeks. We're all stressed and the children are being affected. But we need my salary. We do, but it's not worth it if it's harming the children. They decided that Mary Johnson would work only part-time, being available to pick up the children from school and help with homework. It was around this time that news arrived about the investigation into the children's parents' disappearance. The detective called with an update. Mrs. Mary Johnson, we have news about the case. Did you find the children's parents? Not yet. But we discovered there are several other rural communities where the same thing happened. Entire families disappeared after accepting suspicious job offers. What does that mean? That we're dealing with a much bigger scheme than we imagined. It's organized crime, Mrs. Mary Johnson. Mary Johnson felt a chill. Are the children in danger? We don't know, but I recommend keeping up with safety measures and letting us know if any suspicious person shows up looking for them. That night, Mary Johnson barely managed to sleep. The thought that the children might be in danger because of some criminal scheme terrified her. She didn't tell the children anything about the police chief's call, but she reinforced the safety rules. They couldn't go out alone, couldn't talk to strangers, and always had to let someone know where they were. Why are you so worried? Asked Jake, who always noticed when something was wrong. It's just normal caution, my dear. Big cities have dangers you didn't know in the village. But Jake wasn't completely convinced. He had matured a lot in recent months and could read between the lines. A few weeks later, something happened that confirmed Mary Johnson's fears. She was returning from work when she saw a man standing in front of their house watching. When the man saw her, he quickly walked away. But she managed to see that it was someone she didn't know from the neighborhood. That night, she called the police chief to report the incident. Mrs. Mary Johnson, I'll send a patrol car to make rounds in the area, and I recommend that you change addresses as soon as possible. Move? But we just got settled here. I know it's difficult, but it might be necessary for the children's safety. When Mary Johnson told Catherine about the conversation with the police chief, her daughter got scared. "Mum, this is getting dangerous. Maybe we should seek help from some protection program." "Protection program? Does that exist? I'll look into it. There must be something for families in risky situations." Catherine spent days researching and making contacts. Eventually, she discovered that there were indeed government programs to protect witnesses and victims of organized crime. "But there's a problem," she explained to her mother. "To enter the program, we'd have to agree to be relocated to another state with new identities." New identities? New names, new documents, a new life. The children wouldn't be able to use their real names anymore. Mary Johnson was horrified by the idea. "Catherine, these children have already lost everything. Their parents, their home, the community where they were born. Now they're going to lose even their own names? Mum, it might be the only way to protect them. No, there has to be another way." But in the following weeks, it became clear that the situation was deteriorating. They saw the same suspicious man 2 more times. One of the neighbors mentioned that someone had asked about the family with many children. "Aunt Mary Johnson, are we in danger?" Jake asked one night. Mary Johnson decided it was time to be honest with him. "Maybe, my dear. The people who harmed your parents might be looking for you." "Why? We didn't do anything wrong." "You really didn't. But sometimes bad people do bad things to innocent people." Jake was silent for a long moment. "If we have to leave again, it's okay. We're used to it." The maturity of that 12-year-old boy broke Mary Johnson's heart. "Jake, I promise I'll protect you, no matter what happens." "I know, Aunt Mary Johnson. You've always protected us." 2 days later, Mary Johnson made the most difficult decision of her life. She called the police chief and said she wanted information about the protection program. "It's the safest decision," said the police chief. "We'll arrange new documentation for all of you and a safe location in another state." "And will the children be able to continue studying?" "Yes, they'll be enrolled in schools in the new location with their new names." "And psychological support?" "We'll arrange that too." That night, Mary Johnson gathered all the children for another difficult conversation. "You remember I said we might have to move again?" The children nodded. "Well, the time has come. But this time it will be different. You'll have to use new names for a while." "New names?" asked Emma. "Why?" "To protect you. The bad people who hurt your parents might be looking for you. If you use different names, they won't be able to find you." "And when can we go back to using our real names?" asked Olivia. "When there's no more danger." "And when will that be?" asked Peter. "I don't know, my dear. It could be a long time." The children fell silent, processing the information. "Aunt Mary Johnson," said Jake finally, "no matter what name we use, we'll still be the same family, right?" "Of course, my dear. None of this changes the love we have for each other." A week later, they were on a bus, headed to a small town in the countryside of Iowa, where no one knew them. Each child had new documents with names they had chosen together with social workers. Jake was now called Gabriel. The twins, Emma and Olivia, became Sophia and Beatrice. Peter was now Ralph. Lucas was Matthew. Michael was Philip. And the baby remained Michael because he was too young to understand the change. Mary Johnson was now Frances Smith, and Catherine was Helen Smith. "It's strange to have a new name," said Sophia, who was Emma during the trip. "You'll get used to it," said Mary Johnson, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The town they went to was called Hopeville, a name Mary Johnson found fitting. It was a town of 15,000 people, where everyone knew everyone. They settled into a simple house rented by the protection program. They had a large backyard, where the children could plant the garden they had always wanted. The adjustment was easier than they expected. The children were enrolled in the local school and integrated quickly. The teachers were informed that they came from a complicated family situation, but didn't know the details. Catherine got a job at the city hall, and Mary Johnson went back to work as a caregiver, now at a small nursing home in town. For a few months, life went smoothly. The children were doing well, making friends, getting good grades in school. Mary Johnson began to believe that maybe they had finally found peace. But the tranquility was broken one Saturday morning when Mary Johnson was in the backyard, with the children tending the garden. Gabriel, Jake, approached her with a worried expression. Aunt Frances, he still had trouble remembering the new name. There's a man on the corner who's been watching our house for a long time. Mary Johnson felt her blood run cold. Discreetly, she looked in the direction Gabriel had indicated and saw a man in sunglasses standing across the street, clearly observing the house. "Children, let's go inside," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Why?" asked Sophia. "We're just going inside. Now." Once inside the house, Mary Johnson locked all the doors and windows and called the emergency number the protection program had given her. "They've identified you," said the agent. "You need to leave immediately." "How? We just got settled here." "Mrs. Frances, the children's lives are at risk. A patrol car will pick you up in 20 minutes. Take only the essentials." Mary Johnson hung up the phone with trembling hands. Once again, they would have to leave everything behind and start over. "What's happening?" asked Catherine when she arrived from work and found everyone packing bags. "They found us. We have to go." "Again?" Catherine sat down heavily in a chair. "Mum, this can't go on forever." "I know, but what else can I do?" 20 minutes later, they were once again in an official vehicle, heading to an unknown destination. The children were quiet, resigned to yet another abrupt change in their lives. "Where are we going now?" asked Beatrice, Olivia. "I don't know yet, my dear," replied Mary Johnson. "But we'll stay together, and that's what matters." This time they were taken to an even smaller town in Montana, a place so isolated it didn't even appear on GPS maps. "You'll be safe here," said the agent accompanying them. "It's impossible to stumble upon this place by chance." The house was even simpler than the previous one, but it had one big advantage. It was on a farm on the outskirts of town, completely isolated. "It's like our village," said Ralph, Peter, looking around the rural property. "That's true," agreed Mary Johnson. "You'll be able to run freely here." But despite the familiar environment, the constant moving was taking its toll on the children. They were quieter, more distrustful, less willing to make new friends. "Aunt Frances," said Gabriel one night, "are we going to have to keep running forever?" "I don't know, my love. I hope not. I just want a normal life. Go to school, play with friends, not have to worry about strange men watching us." Mary Johnson hugged the boy, feeling the weight of all the responsibility on her shoulders. "I want that for you too, and I'll keep fighting to make it happen." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." That night, after all the children had gone to sleep, Mary Johnson and Catherine sat on the porch to talk. "Mum, this has to end," said Catherine. "The children can't live on the run forever." "I know, but what can I do? As long as those people are free, they'll continue to be threatened. What if we tried a different approach?" "What do you mean?" "Instead of running, what if we tried to solve the problem head-on?" "Catherine, we're talking about organized crime. These aren't people you negotiate with." "Mum, think about it. Why do these people want the children? It's not pure malice. There has to be some financial motive. Probably the village lands." "Exactly. What if we found a way to legally resolve the land issue?" Mary Johnson became thoughtful. "How?" "By hiring a specialized lawyer, proving that the land sale was fraudulent, recovering the property for the children. That would cost a fortune. Maybe, but it might be cheaper than living on the run forever." "And where are we going to find money for a lawyer?" "I don't know yet, but we'll think of something." In the following days, Catherine spent all her free time researching property law and lawyers specializing in fraud cases. She discovered that there was indeed a possibility of annulling the land sale if they could prove it was done using fake documents. "The problem is, it will be a long and expensive process," she explained to her mother. "How expensive?" "At least 50,000 rees." Mary Johnson almost lost heart when she heard the amount. "Catherine, we don't even have 5,000 reais, let alone 50,000. "I know, Mum, but I'll keep researching. Maybe there's some way to get free legal help." It was then that Catherine discovered something that changed everything. There was an international organization that helped families victimized by land trafficking in developing countries. "Mom, I found an NGO that can help us," she said excitedly. "They provide free lawyers for cases like ours." Are you sure they'll take our case? I'll send an email explaining everything. It can't hurt to try. Catherine spent the entire night writing a detailed account of everything that had happened since Mary Johnson found the children in the village. She attached all the documents they had saved and sent them to the organization. 3 days later, they received a response that filled them with hope. Dear Helen, your case fits perfectly within the profile of situations our organization combats. We are sending a team to assess the situation in person. Sincerely, Dr. Richard Ferguson, Legal Director, Fair Earth International. A week later, Dr. Richard arrived at the farm where they were living. He was a man of about 50, with experience in international land-grabbing cases. Your case is more common than you imagine, he explained after hearing the whole story. There are gangs specialized in identifying isolated rural communities and appropriating their lands through fraud. And is there a way to get the lands back? Asked Mary Johnson. Yes, there is. Especially because you kept the original documents that prove the ancestral ownership of the families. How long would it take? A process like this usually takes between 6 months and 2 years. It depends on how many legal levels we need to appeal to. And the children? Will they have to keep running all that time? Dr. Richard thought for a moment. Not necessarily. If we can prove that the interest in the children's lives is purely property-related, we can request protective measures that allow them to have a normal life while the case proceeds. How so? If we prove in court that the children are the legitimate heirs of the lands and that there are criminal attempts to take over these lands, the judge can order police protection for them without the need for constant identity changes. For the first time in months, Mary Johnson felt a glimmer of hope. When can we start? Immediately. But I need you to know that the process can be dangerous. The people behind this fraud will try to prevent the truth from coming out. More dangerous than living on the run forever? Probably not. That night, Mary Johnson gathered all the children to explain the situation. Dr. Richard is going to try to recover your parents' lands. If he succeeds, you'll be able to use your real names again and live without fear. And if he doesn't succeed, asked Gabriel, then we continue as we are, but at least we tried. I want to try, said Ralph. I'm tired of pretending my name is something else. Me too, the others agreed. So, unanimously, the family decided to fight for their rights instead of continuing to run away. The first months of the legal process were intense. Dr. Richard and his team collected evidence, interviewed witnesses, and gradually built a solid case against the gang that had fraudulently sold the lands. They discovered that the operation was much larger than they had imagined. More than 20 rural communities had been victims of the same scheme in the last 5 years. You were the first people who had the courage to report it, explained Dr. Richard. That's why you're so important to dismantle the entire operation. During this time, the children were able to go back to using their real names. The court decision that guaranteed police protection for them allowed them to have a more normal life. Jake went back to being Jake. Emma and Olivia went back to being Emma and Olivia, and so on. It feels so good to hear my name again, said Emma one morning. For me too, Olivia agreed. They were transferred to a larger city where they could attend a better school and have access to more resources. The police protection was discreet but effective. Mary Johnson got a job at a school as an administrative assistant, and Catherine was promoted at the new city's town hall. For a few months, life went on relatively normally. The children were developing well, making friends, participating in extracurricular activities. But the real test came when it was time to testify in court. You are not required to testify, explained Dr. Richard, but your statements would be very important to convict those responsible. Will the children have to speak? Asked Mary Johnson. Only Jake, if he wants to. He was the one who interacted the most with Roger and can provide important information. Jake, now 13 years old, agreed to testify. I want these men to pay for what they did to my family, he said, with a determination that impressed everyone. The trial was a crucial moment. When Jake entered the courtroom and saw Roger in the defendant's seat, he initially became nervous, but Dr. Richard reassured him. Remember, he can't harm you. He's in custody, and you are protected. Jake's testimony was moving. He told how his parents had left full of hope to work in the city, how the children had waited for months for news, how they had endured hunger and fear. "And what did you tell them when you came back to get them?" asked the prosecutor. "He said our parents were fine and wanted us to go live with them in the city," replied Jake. "Did you believe him?" "At first, yes, but then I noticed he was different from before. More nervous, and the men with him seemed like criminals." "Why do you think he wanted to take you?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "I think he wanted us to disappear. That way no one would question what he did with our lands." Jake's testimony was decisive. Along with all the evidence gathered by Dr. Richard, it was enough to convict Roger and the whole gang. 20 years in prison for each, announced the judge in the sentencing. When they left the courtroom, Mary Johnson hugged Jake with tears in her eyes. "You were very brave, my love. It had to be done, Aunt Mary Johnson, for my family and the other families they harmed." A few months later, the decision about the lands came. The judge determined that all the sales had been fraudulent and that the properties should be returned to the rightful heirs. "The children are now officially owners of their family lands," announced Dr. Richard. "And what does that mean, exactly?" asked Mary Johnson. "That means that when they come of age, they can decide what to do with the properties. Sell, live there, lease to others. The choice is theirs." "And until then?" "Until then, the lands will be under the management of a guardian. In this case, you, as the children's legal guardian." Mary Johnson felt the weight of responsibility, but also a great satisfaction. Finally, the children had back something that was rightfully theirs. That night, she gathered all the children to give them the news. "You have recovered your parents' lands," she announced. The children were silent for a moment, processing the information. "Does that mean we can go back to our village?" asked Peter. "If you want to, yes." "And our parents?" asked Emma, the question everyone had been avoiding. Mary Johnson took a deep breath. "My love, during the investigation, no sign of your parents was found. It's likely that they are no longer with us." "Did they die?" asked Olivia with tears in her eyes. "We don't know for sure, but there has been no news from them for a long time." The children cried together for the first time since Mary Johnson had found them. It was as if they could finally process the loss of their parents. "But you have a family," said Mary Johnson, hugging them all. "You have each other and you have me and Catherine." "Will you still be our mother even though we have our lands back?" asked Jake. "If you want me to, yes, forever." In the following months, the family had to make several important decisions. The main one was, return to the village where it all began, or stay in the city where they were living. "I want to visit our village," said Peter, "but I don't know if I want to live there again." "Why?" asked Mary Johnson. "Too many bad memories. And there's no good school there, no hospital, none of the things we've gotten used to in the city." The others agreed. They wanted to keep ownership of the lands, but not necessarily return to live there. "What if we rented the lands to other families?" suggested Jake. "That way we earn some money and help other people who need a place to live." It was a mature and generous idea. After much discussion, they decided that was what they would do. Dr. Richard helped them find a family of farmers who had lost their lands in a similar situation and wanted to start over. They made a fair lease agreement, which guaranteed income for the children and opportunity for the other family. With the income from leasing the lands, added to the salaries of Mary Johnson and Catherine, the family's financial situation finally stabilized. "For the first time since we met, we're not worried about money," commented Catherine one night. "It's a strange feeling," agreed Mary Johnson. After so much time struggling, the children could finally have things that other children considered normal. Their own books, new clothes, some toys, weekend outings. "Aunt Mary Johnson," said Emma one afternoon, "do you remember when we were in the village starving and you showed up?" "Yes, I remember, my dear. Back then I thought you were an angel that God sent to save us. And what do you think now?" "Now I know you're not an angel. You're better than an angel. You're our mother." Mary Johnson felt her eyes fill with tears. During all those difficult months, she had wondered if she was doing the right thing, if she could take care of 7 children, if she wasn't being irresponsible. Now she knew that all the difficulties had been worth it. 2 years later, The family's life was completely transformed. The older children were excelling in school, some already thinking about university. The younger ones had overcome their traumas and were happy, confident children. Mary Johnson, at 62 years old, had found a purpose she never imagined having. She wasn't just a widow living alone. She was mother to 7 children who loved and respected her. Catherine had married a young man from the city and was pregnant with her first child. The apartment they had rented no longer fit the whole family, so they bought a bigger house with the money from the lands. "Mom, you performed a miracle," said Catherine one afternoon when they were all gathered in the backyard. "What miracle?" "You took 7 abandoned children and turned them into a beautiful, united family. They transformed me, Catherine. When I found them, I was lost, without direction. They gave me a reason to live. Even with all the difficulties, even having to flee, change identities, live in fear, even with all that, every difficult moment was worth it." That night, after all the children had gone to sleep, Mary Johnson sat on the porch and thought about everything that had happened since that day her car broke down on the dirt road. If someone had told her 2 years ago that she would be mother to 7 children, that she would face organized crime, that she would change identities multiple times, that she would fight in court against a gang of land grabbers, she would have thought that person was crazy. But life had its own plans, and sometimes the best moments in life came in the most unexpected packages. She looked at the house where her 7 children slept peacefully and safely, and knew she had found exactly where she was supposed to be. The next day was Jake's birthday, who was turning 15. Mary Johnson was preparing a surprise party with the help of the other children. "Aunt Mary Johnson," said Peter while helping decorate, "do you think if our parents were here they would be proud of us?" It was a difficult but important question. "I'm sure they would, my dear. You've all become wonderful people. You study well, help each other, are caring and respectful. Any parent would be proud. And are you proud of us?" "Very proud, every single day." Jake's party was a success. For the first time in years, they could invite friends from school, neighbors, people who had become important in their lives. "Make a wish," said Emma, when Jake was about to blow out the candles. Jake closed his eyes and stayed silent for a moment. "What did you wish for?" asked Olivia. "I wished for our family to always stay together, and for Aunt Mary Johnson to live many years to take care of us." "You can't tell the wish," scolded Michael, "or it won't come true." "It doesn't matter," said Jake. "This wish has already come true." Everyone laughed, and Mary Johnson felt her heart full of gratitude. Later, when all the guests had left and the children were helping clean up the mess, Mary Johnson received an unexpected call. It was the sheriff from the town where it all began. "Mrs. Mary Johnson, I have some news that might interest you." "What news?" "We found information about the children's parents." Mary Johnson's heart raced. "Are they alive?" "I can't give details over the phone, but can I travel there to speak with you in person?" "Of course. When?" "Next week, if possible." Mary Johnson hung up the phone with trembling hands. After so long, could there be news about the children's parents? She decided not to tell the children anything until she knew exactly what it was about. She didn't want to create expectations that could be disappointed. The week passed slowly. Mary Johnson could barely concentrate at work, thinking about what the sheriff might have discovered. When he finally arrived, she was so nervous she could hardly speak. "Sheriff, tell me quickly, are they alive?" "Mrs. Mary Johnson, I'll be direct with you. The children's parents were found on a clandestine farm 1,000 kilometers from here. They were being kept in forced labor." "Forced labor?" "Yes. The gang that stole the lands also kept the former owners as slaves on an illegal farm. It was a very well-planned operation." "And are they okay?" "They're alive, but weakened. They spent almost 3 years in precarious conditions. They'll need medical and psychological care." "Where are they now?" "In a hospital in Chicago. They were rescued 2 weeks ago in a joint operation." Mary Johnson felt a mix of relief, joy, and apprehension. "Can the children see them?" "Yes, they can, but you need to prepare them. The parents are very changed, physically and emotionally." "Do they know about the children, that they've been well cared for?" "They know, and they're anxious to see them." That night, Mary Johnson gathered all the children to give them the most important news of their lives. "I have something very important to tell you," she began, taking a deep breath. The children looked at her attentively. "You remember how you always wondered what happened to your parents?" "Yes," answered Jake. "Well, they've been found. They're alive." The silence that followed was deafening. Then all the children started crying at once. "Are they okay?" asked Peter through tears. "They're recovering. They went through very difficult things, but they're alive and safe now." "Can we see them?" asked Emma. "Yes, you can. We'll travel to Chicago next weekend." "And after that?" asked Olivia. "Are we going to live with them again?" It was the question Mary Johnson had been dreading. She knew the time would come to return the children to their biological parents, but she wasn't emotionally prepared for it. "That's something you'll decide together with them," she replied, trying to hide the sadness in her voice. The trip to Chicago was filled with anticipation and nervousness. The children were eager to see their parents, but also apprehensive. They had changed a lot in 3 years. Mary Johnson was also nervous. How would the parents react upon learning she had become the mother to their children? Would they be grateful or resentful? At the hospital, they were greeted by social workers who explained the situation. "The parents have been through severe trauma," the psychologist explained. "They might be emotionally unstable during the first meetings." When they finally entered the room where the parents were gathered, Mary Johnson barely recognized them. They were thin, aged, clearly marked by years of suffering. But when they saw the children, their faces lit up. "My children," whispered Jake's mother, stretching out her arms. The reunion was emotional and painful at the same time. There were tears, hugs, unanswered questions. "You've grown so much," said Emma and Olivia's father, touching his daughters' faces as if he couldn't believe they were real. "Where were you?" asked Peter. "Why didn't you come back for us?" "They wouldn't let us leave, son," his father explained. "We were watched all the time. We tried to escape several times, but we were always caught." "And now will you be okay?" asked Michael. "Yes, we will, and we'll be together again." During the conversation, Mary Johnson stayed in the background, observing. It was clear that the children loved their parents and that the parents loved the children, but it was also clear that 3 years had created a distance that would be hard to overcome. When Jake's father finally addressed her, Mary Johnson felt her heart race. "Are you Mary Johnson who took care of our children?" "Yes, I am." "We have no words to thank you for what you did. You saved their lives." "They saved my life," Mary Johnson replied. "How so?" "When I found them, I was lost without purpose. They gave me a reason to live." Jake's father hugged her with tears in his eyes. "You're an angel." During the following days, they spent a lot of time at the hospital, talking, getting to know each other again. The parents told about the years of captivity, and the children told about their life with Mary Johnson. "Aunt Mary Johnson is our mother too now," Emma told her biological mother. "How so?" "She took care of us, protected us, loved us. She's our mother, just as much as you are." Initially, Mary Johnson was worried this would cause jealousy or resentment, but to her surprise, the parents understood perfectly. "She did for you what we couldn't," said Emma and Olivia's mother. "How could we not be grateful?" At the end of the week, it was time to make decisions about the future. The doctors had said the parents would need a few more months of treatment before they could fully take over the children's care. "In the meantime, can they stay with you?" asked Jake's father. "Of course," Mary Johnson replied. "And after that?" "Then you decide what's best for them." But the decision came from the children themselves. "We want everyone to live together," announced Peter. "Our parents, Aunt Mary Johnson, everyone." "How so?" asked Mary Johnson. "We don't want to choose between you," Emma explained. "You're our family, all of you." It was an unusual proposal, but one that made sense. For 3 years, Mary Johnson had been those children's mother. It wasn't fair or necessary to break those bonds now. "But how would that work?" asked Peter's father. "We could buy a big house," suggested Jake, "with the money from the land. A home where everyone fits." "Do you really want this?" asked Mary Johnson. "We do," all the children answered in unison. And so was born the most unusual family in town, a house where 7 children lived, their biological parents in recovery, Mary Johnson, who had become the adoptive mother, and Catherine with her husband and baby. "I've never seen a family like this," commented the neighbor when they moved into the new house. "Neither have I," agreed Mary Johnson. "But sometimes the best families are the ones we don't plan." The adjustment wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, jealousy, confusion about roles and responsibilities. But little by little, everyone found their place. The biological parents dedicated themselves to physical and emotional recovery, with the help of specialized therapists. Mary Johnson continued to be the main maternal figure in the children's daily lives, while the parents gradually took on more responsibilities. "It's like we have 2 sets of parents," commented Olivia one afternoon. "And is that bad?" asked Mary Johnson. "No, it's good. More people to love us." A year later, the situation had completely stabilized. The biological parents were fully recovered and actively participated in raising their children. Mary Johnson had found a balance between being a mother and being a grandmother. "How would you define our family?" Catherine asked her mother in a conversation. "As perfect," replied Mary Johnson. "Not in the sense that we don't have problems, but in the sense that we have enough love to solve any problem." "Do you regret anything?" "Nothing, not even the hard parts." "Why?" "Because everything we went through brought us here. And here is exactly where I want to be." That night during dinner, Jake made an announcement that moved everyone. "Everyone, I've decided what I want to study in college." "What?" they all asked. "Law. I want to be a lawyer like Dr. Richard. I want to help other families who go through what we went through." "That's beautiful, son," said Mary Johnson with tears in her eyes. "And I want to study psychology," announced Emma, "to help children who have been through trauma." "And I want to be a doctor," said Olivia, "to take care of sick people like our parents were." Mary Johnson looked around the table full of people she loved and felt a deep gratitude. Those children she had found abandoned and scared had become brave young people determined to make a difference in the world. "You make me very proud," she said. "We learned from you," replied Peter. "You taught us that when we see someone in need of help, we don't turn our backs." "And that family isn't just who you're born with," added Michael. "It's who chooses to stay together." 2 years later, when Jake was graduating from high school, he gave a speech as class valedictorian that became famous in town. "My story began with a tragedy," he told the packed audience. "My parents disappeared when I was 12, and I became responsible for taking care of 6 younger siblings. We spent months alone, scared, hungry, without hope. But then a woman came into our lives who changed everything. Mary Johnson was going through her own problems, but when she saw us in need of help, she didn't hesitate. She taught us that family isn't defined by blood but by love. That courage isn't about not being afraid, but about doing what's right even when you are afraid, and that there is always hope, even in the most difficult situations. Today, I don't define my story by the tragedy that started it, but by the miracles that came after. Miracles made of small acts of love and courage from ordinary people who chose to make a difference. And that's what I want for my life, to be a person who makes a difference, to be someone who doesn't turn their back when they see someone in need of help, to be like the woman who saved my family and taught me that love is the most powerful force in the world." When Jake finished his speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Mary Johnson wept with emotion, surrounded by her huge family. "Thank you," she whispered to the sky, thinking of the husband she had lost and wondering if he would approve of the choices she had made. At that moment, she felt a deep peace, as if a voice told her yes, Joseph would be proud of the courageous woman she had become. After the graduation, the family organized a big party at home. Everyone was there. The biological parents fully recovered, Catherine with her husband and 2 young children, Mary Johnson, and of course the 7 children who were now young adults, ready to change the world. "A toast," said Jake's father, raising his glass. "To Mary Johnson, the woman who saved our family and taught us the true meaning of unconditional love. To our crazy and perfect family," added Emma. To second chances, said Catherine. To miracles, said Olivia. To hope, said Peter. To courage, said Lucas. To unity, said Michael. To love, said Mary Johnson. And they all toasted, knowing they had built something rare and precious, a family that had been born from suffering but flourished in love. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Mary Johnson sat on the porch and looked at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened since that day her car broke down on a dirt road. If someone had told her that seemingly unlucky trip would lead to the greatest adventure of her life, she never would have believed it. But life had its own plans. She had left home that day as a lonely and hopeless widow. Now she was a mother, grandmother, protector, mentor, and heroine of a story that seemed impossible but was completely real. "Thank you," she said aloud, not knowing exactly who she was thanking, but feeling the need to express her gratitude. "For what?" asked a voice behind her. It was Jake, who had come down for a drink of water and saw her on the porch. "For everything," she replied. "For you, for your siblings, for this family, for this life. We're the ones who should thank you." "No, my son, we saved each other." Jake sat beside her and they were silent for a moment, watching the stars. "Aunt Mary Johnson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you feel fulfilled?" "Completely." "And you?" "Me too, but I still have a lot I want to do." "Like what?" "I want to help other families like ours. I want to change laws that allow things like what happened to us to keep happening. I want to make a difference. I'm sure you will. You taught me it's possible. I just showed you what you already had inside you." They talked a while longer, planning the future, remembering the past, grateful for the present. When they finally got up to go to sleep, Mary Johnson looked at the stars one more time and smiled. Her life had started over at 60, and what a new beginning it had been. End of story. So, what did you think of this story of overcoming and love? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Do you know a similar story in your family or community? We love reading about your experiences. And if you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow more emotional stories like this one.